Okay, it's time to talk about shipping. You have built an incredible Flutter app, but the final hurdle is deployment to the app stores. It's annoying. Our next speaker is a mobile developer who has navigated this process countless times and is here to share the crucial tips to get approval faster. Please welcome Joseph Taukek with his essential session, Flutter apps deployment to both Playstore and App Store.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me here. I'm actually glad the way you pronounced my surname. It was as if you're a native. So thank you. Big ups to that. Good evening, everybody. My name is Joseph, just like Anna said. I'm a mobile developer. I've been building mobile applications for at least the past 4 years. I use Flutter and that specifically for my mobile app development. And today, I just want to share with us some tips and guide on getting your app approved on Play Store and App Store, respectively. So, basically, the choice of this particular topic for me was as a result of my experience shipping applications to the production or to the live environment, right, to all app stores, right. And at the beginning of my career, I just realized a lot of people tend to think building the application is like the major work in app development, right? But building the application is more like is stage in app development. Now, getting your application to be live for the public to see your application, to install your application, to use your application is sometimes more tasking than building the application itself, right? And if you do that, you can see that with all the sometimes the policies that have been updated, the terms and conditions and stuff, right? So it is very important to pay close attention to some of these policies, to some of these guides that are being shared by each of these platforms, either App Store or Play Store, right? That okay, you follow these guides, these steps procedurally. Like you just have to work with them, work closely with them, pay attention to the details and the requirements, so that whenever you ship your application, you don't get or you don't keep getting your application rejected and having to review, send it out, reject, review, send it. Like so, at the end of the day, you might discover probably you planned to deploy your application within a week, but because of you've not paid attention or you've not read through some of the policies that were being changed or some of the policies that were being introduced, you might find yourself dragging your deployment for over a month, which sometimes it kind of takes you off your initial target of when you wanted your application to be live or to be in production, right? Because most of the time, whenever you're building a software or an application, you already have like a roadmap for your application, like from when you start building to when you deploy it, right? So I just want to talk about it like briefly. Right. So first of all, I know everyone knows like what app deployment is, right? But if you look at it, what exactly is app deployment? It's not just okay, I want my app to be live, right? It's more like releasing your application to the public, right, or to the private individuals. If say for example your application is designed for a particular set of people or a particular category of people, right, to either Play Store or App Store, right. Now if the deployment is like the final stage of your app development, right. Which is like okay, I'm done building this whole thing that I've taken a lot of time, I've taken it paid a lot of attention, put in a lot of work to do, right? And then now I want the public to discover my application, right? I want everyone to see my application. I want everyone to install my application and use it, right? Now, one of well, before I get to that particularly, one of the reasons or one of the decision for me behind choosing Flutter as a technology to use is because um, Flutter has actually narrowed down the process of app development for a lot of developers, right? I think personally, in my own opinion, I think Google made a big move with Flutter, right? Why? Because now previously, I also do Kotlin and Swift. like let me just say occasionally, not like full time, like where I use Flutter. But previously, imagine you having to build an application, one application twice with different programming languages, right, or with different tech stacks. So if you're before Flutter became a big deal, before Flutter became a thing, a lot of the time you build an application with Kotlin. You can, and Kotlin, you couldn't compile with iOS for iOS. You couldn't make it compatible with iOS at the time. So after building with Kotlin, you have to now get, if you are not an iOS developer, a Swift developer, you have to go and hire another person who does Swift to come and build your iOS version, right? But with Flutter, we have a single code base, right? You just build your application, do the necessary setups that you need to do, right? And then you can build for Android and you build for iOS using a single code base. And to me, I think that is an amazing part of technology for me. Like, I just feel like the introduction of Flutter took the stress off a lot of people, of a lot of companies, a lot of individuals, right? So you realize that, okay, so now I can have like I can build anything with a single code base, and then voila, I'm already like, I could just compile for each of the platforms that I want to compile for, right? So now what once you're done building your application, right? Because just like I said, the major goal here is not the it's not the app deployment, it's not the app development itself, it's the deployment, right? So I would like to start first of all with Play Store. So I just realized, okay, I just discovered lately, unlike before, for Play Store now, if you want to deploy application, you'd have to first get a minimum of 12 testers, right? Then you get 12 testers. Now, a lot of people don't understand the reason behind having 12 testers. One of the reasons for requesting 12 testers is to save you the stress of, okay, having to deploy your app, and then you have to wait for people to test and stuff. No, once you get your 12 testers, so some people, you can get a couple of QA engineers to come test your application, give their reviews, right? So once you get the 12 testers, they install your application and run it and give you a feedback. You make improvement in the areas where they found maybe one thing or the other that they feel, okay, this should have been better, right? And once they do that, then you make corrections on that. So once you've gotten your 12 testers, the next stage is to leave your application for 14 days, right? And I'm still being specific with Play Store. Now you leave your application for 14 days. Under these 14 days, it is expected that your 12 testers get to test your application, use it, give you feedback and stuff, right? So once that is done, then that is when you can now apply to production. But here's a little secret. I just want to give everyone here that so the this particular policy, these particular steps I just mentioned, it's basically for new accounts, right? So if you already had an existing account, you don't need to go through all that stress. You just need to do right by adhering to whatever policies have been set there. So, but now the let me start with your app content, right? Your app content is also a reason for your application to be denied from production. Why is that? You have to basically break down and tell Play Store what, or the console, yeah, you have to tell them, what do I have in my application? What does this application do? Right? What is entailed in it? Like, am I advertising? Am I collecting users' data? Um, do I allow users to be able to delete their account at any time? Um, like, you just give them a breakdown of what your application does, how you protect your users' data, how you use your users' data, right? Those are all embedded in your app content, right? So a lot of the time, maybe people, I don't want to say like people generally, but like some developers, you find out we try to, or some of them try to like, okay, skip some part of the app content. Maybe they feel this is not needed, or this information is not needed by Play Store. They don't need to know about this. But no, I feel they do need to know, right? If I am hosting your application, then I need to know what your application does. I need to know that your application does no harm to the general public, does no harm to underage or any category of people, right? So that is one of the very important parts of making sure that your app content um, adheres to the policies that have been set, right? Then next and most importantly is your privacy policy. Now, a lot of people do tend to not understand how the privacy policy works with app deployment. Privacy policy, what it does for you, it gives you, like, it saves you the stress of um having to kind of individually tell people, okay, this is what our application does, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're covering. If you publish it, and okay, basically, if you publish your privacy policy and you upload it, make sure that, just like I said, your app content, what your app does, is also entailed in your in your privacy policy. How do you handle users' data? How do you protect users' data? How private is their data? How secure, how safe is their data with you? Right? All these, I know they sound like minor, they sound minor to some people, but at the end of the day, these are the things that will determine your application get if they will determine if your application gets approved or not on either the Play Store or the App Store, right? You have to kind of break it down. Sometimes um you don't need to have like a lengthy privacy policy. You just need to have like a detailed privacy policy, right? So having detailed privacy policy does not entail you drafting or publishing a very long text, a long content as to what the application does. You just hit the nail straight, and then you let them know, okay, this is what we do, this is how we get your information, this is what we do with your information, this is how we protect your information, right? So these two are kind of very important when it comes to app deployment, right? And I'll be remiss if I don't say I'm still talking about Play Store. But then at the end of the day, whatever I'm talking about on Play Store also applies to App Store. Reason is because it's kind of a similar process, right? But not the same. They are similar, but a lot of things are similar when it comes to the app deployment. Now, then next, you want to look at the what you are uploading, right? So, personally, I think one of the best advice I got from a GDE while I was building mobile application, when I started my software development journey, was it is better you upload your app bundle instead of the APK file, right? Now, what does your app bundle do? Your app bundle has everything that is required by the Play Store to check and go through your application, right? Which is compared to the APK. APK is like just the build file of your application, whereas your app bundle is more like a collection of the resources you use, like stuff, like up dependencies and everything you use in your application. So deploying with an app bundle is way better than and is way more convenient than deploying with an APK file. Why? And just like I said, it gives more detail and it gives them more room to study your application and then review it. It's easier for review than the APK file, because at the end of the day, sometimes even if you deploy or you upload the APK file, um, depend like certain things will still be requested from you. You need to like tell them, okay, what plugins, what dependencies am I using, how am I using them, right? So just like I said, make sure you use or try to learn to use app bundle for deployment, right? Now, also, once you upload your app bundle, then in terms of screenshots, I know, like, it's kind of a very funny thing to say to people that your screenshots can determine if your application is approved or not. Why? Okay, so here's a simple example, right? Say, for example, I got the 12 testers to review my application, and then at the end of the testing, at the end of the 14 days, I've already uploaded like my app files, the resource files, right, the screenshots and stuff, right? Then I had to make some changes based on the review I got, based on the QA test and stuff, right? Then now you tend to maybe say, for example, now I'm just using like a use case. You had to change your login screen or the content of your login screen, or maybe you had to make some update to your sign up, and the earlier screenshots you used might have been different from the one that you currently have after your QA testers are reviewed and stuff. So say you made some corrections. So there's these I don't want to call it lazy, but there's this carefree. Sometimes it feels more like carefree attitude to, okay, it's still the same application, right? So you might just want to go with what you already uploaded. You don't want to go through having to take screenshots of the app again, go to Canva or Figma, adjust it, bring it back, make sure it's in all screen sizes, tab, Android, you get. And so, but it is important you do these things because at the end of the day, they are the determinants of whether your application gets approved or not, right? So pay close attention to what you are uploading, right? So there are times they will tell you some I've seen reviews of applications where they tell you, okay, your screenshot does not match the app content or your the files what we are seeing on your application, so you need to make corrections. So if you look at it at the end of the all these things end up delaying your deployment process. Just like I said, if you had a target of 1 week and then you're now having to go back and forth with some of these things, you might end up seeing yourself in 3 weeks, 1 month, you're still working on deployment, right? So it's important to pay attention to these things, right? Then now I would like to move on to App Store. Sorry, guys. I think I have like 30, or I should have like less than 30 minutes for this entire presentation. So I just want to make it as fast and then as educative as possible, right? So that I can have time to take your questions. So now moving to App Store. So here's the talking about App Store, you realize Apple does not just approve applications anyhow. Like I and personally, I feel to some extent that Apple are more strict when it comes to like checking and like kind of reviewing applications than even Play Store, and which is also a good thing because just like I said, nobody. If I'm hosting your application, I would like to know what I am uh, giving out to the public on your behalf, right? What I'm hosting on your behalf. I don't want people to come and install something that you're not proud of and then bad reviews and stuff. So to save you that stress. So in terms of Apple now, I think your info.plist file should be one of your you should pay close attention to your info.plist file. Why? Because that is where you state out everything you're currently using in your application. If I'm using images, or if I'm taking pictures or using your gallery, just see anything media, you have to state it in your info.plist file. And then if I'm trying to use a location, I have to state it. You have to state it in your info.plist file as well, just like you do in your Android manifest when it comes to Android, right? So try to know what plugins and dependencies you're using in your application, right? And then make sure you clearly state them out in your info.plist file. Now, what does that do for you? It allows Apple or App Store Connect to look through what you've stated. So at the point of reviewing your application, they don't have to start telling you, okay, we saw you are collecting location access, but you've not stated that in your info.plist file. So you have to now go back, start looking to add it, and then sometimes at the end, you might want to build your build may crash and stuff like that. So paying close attention to things like that are very important, right? Now on your App Store Connect as well, it is important you do the same thing, just like I mentioned the Android. Your app content, make sure it is detailed enough. Tell them what your application does. Choose your app category. Tell, is it a government application? Is it yes? Is it no? Does it support any content for underage? You state all these things. Just tell them like, okay, this is what my application does, right? Then also most importantly, whenever you're building an application, make sure you give users an option. Like this is also like a cheat code because a lot of people get this in return, like as a review, right? Make sure you give users the opportunity to delete their data, right? Whenever you're building an application, because you are not supposed to hold on to your users' data like you're not supposed to hold on to your users data without their consent. So whenever you're collecting users data, you seek their consent. Now seeking their consent also means you're supposed to give them an opportunity. Say for example, you don't expect everyone to you can't force people to use your application, let me put it that way, right? So if I'm using your application for a reason, and then at the end of it I feel okay, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve with the application, or I'm not interested in using this application, I should be able to delete my account. So make sure you provide an option for users to delete their account, because a lot of the times you always get that review. If you fail to do that, you will definitely get your application will not be approved. It will fall back. They will reject your application and tell you, okay, if you said you're collecting users' data, you need to provide them with an option to delete their data, right? Or to delete their account. So always make sure you do that. Like If you know, say, if you know, for example, say your your policy states like your deleting an account will take a couple of days or a couple of weeks before it's permanently deleted. You also state it clearly that okay, this is how long it will take us to delete your account. These things, I know they sound minor at some point or to some people, but they are very important when you want to have your application live, right? Right. Then also the privacy policy, just like I also mentioned in the under the Android in Play Store, you also need to specify it. So it is important you use the same privacy policy for your application. Just publish it. If you can't publish it to a website, Google Docs gives you an option to publish your document, right? So you can just draft it in Google Docs. There's If you go to the side menu, you get to see an option to publish that particular Google Docs, and you can then copy the link and then use it. So by that you have like a solid privacy policy or any app information that you need to provide, and then it's already hosted for you by Google, and that's also part of the should I say, power that Google Workspace gives you, right? It has a lot of things that you can use to have your application running perfectly, right? So now, I think that being said, I would like to now talk about for iOS builds now. There's something a lot of people tend to kind of misunderstand. So I know the IPA file is like the APK file for iOS, right? But personally, I feel yeah, you can when you're building just build your iOS bundle as well, right? Now if you're uploading to if or when you want to deploy application, right, it is important. I know sometimes it saves you time, right? But I personally want to tell you it is important you scan your application, right? So when you go to your Xcode, right, uh, first of all you have two options. You can either push directly to production, or you can scan your application, like just have a quick scan through your application. I really advise scanning your application before pushing to App Store Connect. Why do you do that, or what does that help you do? That helps you in a long way to go. It's more like it reviews your application before App Store reviews your application, right? And a lot of times, I understand that developers sometimes are scared of scanning the application on Xcode because you might yeah, encounter an error that you have to fix, and maybe you had already built your application and I feel I'm ready for production, right? So it is important you try as much as possible to scan it. You get a breakdown once it's successfully scanned and there's no other issue. You can then push to App Store Connect. Now that saves you a lot of stress also. Then now, when you're trying to deploy to App Store, it is also important that you test your application on your real device, just like you do with Android, right? Now, there are some functionalities that may work well on simulators, but when it comes to an actual device or a real device, you might encounter some challenges, right? So try as much as possible to test your application on a physical device, just as you do with your Android, right? Don't just rely on simulators alone. Simulators are meant to help you build your application, but once you are done building and you want to get to production, it is advisable you also test on a real device, because people who will use your application are not going to use simulators for your application. They are going to use actual iPhones, actual Android devices, right? So another step you can take in your app deployment for App Store is also to test your application on the actual device. And when you go to your profile and devices, you can add an a physical Apple device, an iOS device, right? Where you upload there are a couple of steps, which is very straightforward. You just copy the app ID, and then you upload it there. You save it, and then once it is confirmed, you can now run your iOS application on a real device, right? Instead of having to run it on a simulator. So, um, I think that being said, I want to now I'm trying to wrap it up real quick. Now when you are using when you're deploying your app, learn to I think this one is optional, but I strongly recommend you whenever I'm building an application for anyone, right? Try to use Crashlytics or Analytics, anyone that you feel more convenient or comfortable using, right? Firebase gives you Firebase Analytics that you can integrate into your application, right? Like Firebase is a very friendly developer tool for me. Like it's one of like I won't say I don't want to say I'm trying to think of a word to use, but Firebase, I feel like a lot of developers they do not fully understand what Firebase can do for you as a developer, right? But yes, back to the point that yeah, try to use Crashlytics or analytics. You can use Firebase Analytics for your application. Now, what does that do? It helps you to monitor your app performances, right? So it's not just that. Instead, you don't wait for users to give you a bad review of your application. But if once you're using analytics or Crashlytics, you can now you get a report of how your application is performing. Then you in fact that helps you ahead of time to make your changes for say your version 2 or anything or any version that you'll be releasing next, right? So it is very important, it's very key that we you try to monitor your application from within. You don't just rely on user reviews, right? So that keeps you ahead. Then so now for CI/CD, I would want to say that feels more, sometimes it feels more like a preference thing, right? So what I'm saying is the preference thing is not everyone wants to do like auto deployment, but for CI/CD, I recommend I seriously recommend Shorebird, which is Flutter's only CI/CD tool like for app deployment. Aside, I'm not talking about GitHub. Yeah, GitHub is also for CI/CD, but a lot of the times GitHub works better for web than mobile, right? And if you're into the software or into app development, you understand that mobile is sometimes considered more complicated than web. So for Flutter developers specifically, I would advise you use Shorebird because Shorebird has proven to be like the best tool out there for your continuous deployment in terms of Flutter applications, right? So um, then your versioning. Now this is also another thing that sounds minor, but then it's still important to your app deployment. Now your make sure you have like a consistent versioning of the application, right? You don't want to have version 2 on App Store, version 1 point something on Play Store. So try to be consistent with your app versioning. Anytime you're deploying your application, you are making an update, make an update consistently. Make sure if I'm deploying for Android, I'm also deploying for App Store. If I'm deploying any version for this, even if it's a minor change you're making, make sure you update both, right? Just so to have like a consistent versioning, right? So I think with this I feel like I've pretty much covered the basics that people tend to not pay attention to when it comes to app deployment. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Anna. So I think I'll be willing to take your questions if you have any for me.
Thank you. Now we have a chat. We haven't questions, but thanks that you clarify. And yes, it's really crucial. And especially, you should care a lot about code of conduct and share how you gather users' data, and especially in Europe. Because if you forgot about this or don't care, you can pay so a lot of money just because you skip these steps.
Yeah.
Yes.